like this.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your quick-fingered host, Madelyn.
I'm your check your pockets host, Emma.
Oh, and thanks for tuning in to this week's show. It's my side quest. So my choice of topic this week is we're going to talk about theft in games. We're going to talk about stealing.
Was there an inspiration for this? Were you stolen from? Did you steal something, Madeline?
Yes. No. I asked Click Boyfriend what should the podcast be about. And he said...
Did he steal something?
I know. Now I'm worried.
Their cats? His roommate's cats?
Seriously. His roommate's dog better watch out. Takes so many pictures of him. No, he was like, I heard there was something with avowed and theft.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, sounds good. That's as good a topic as any.
It is. It's a good topic. We're really stealing from Clickbait Boyfriend recently for these side quest topics. Actually.
I know. Soon our own ideas will come back, I'm sure. I should have done games about beer, games about being Irish.
Oh, it is that. It's
James
the Irish
Joyce's
Day.
Ulysses and its impact on video games.
Now that I'm not in Boston anymore, it's not as fixed in my mind, the date.
Sure, yeah, less relevant for you. So to be clear, we're not talking about game piracy.
No. Or like copyright violations.
Or like games that take inspiration from other games.
Yeah.
You can go back and listen to our episode about Marvel Rivals for thoughts on that. Somebody brought up Marvel Rivals to me this week, and I knew what it was thanks to the podcast. So that was
good.
cool.
You're hip and cool.
I got to be like, oh, did you play Overwatch? And they were like, no, and I don't even like Marvel.
What an interesting conundrum they found themselves
That's what
in.
I said. I was like, how did you end up playing this game? You're in no core demographic. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about this week. We're talking about like theft and stealing type mechanics.
Yes.
In games.
Being a thief.
Being a thief. Engaging in thievery. So I do feel like what this mechanic looks like, as with many things, is impacted significantly by game genre.
Yes.
But stealing is hot. Stealing is hip. Everybody wants to steal.
Yeah?
That's what it seems like.
Thieving has always been a thing in games in the sense that you walk into someone's house, right? And they might have an item somewhere that you pick up.
Yeah.
Like, if you're really thinking about this,
there's a lot of thievery.
It's just that the games didn't really acknowledge it as such for a while. Or if they did, it was like in limited capacities, right?
Yeah. No, it was accepted that you would go in and, I mean, I think of breaking the pots in Zelda as sort of the prototypical example of this. You know, you just go in and you smash and grab anything in anyone's home. Their home that you have entered without asking.
Yeah.
So, a lot of robbery taking place in an unacknowledged way.
We could probably do a whole side quest on like you can just wander into people's houses trope in games.
Yeah, on like locks.
Yeah.
We could just do a whole side quest series on like various kind of like thief type mechanics, lock picking and lack thereof, thievery, interrogation. I don't know, whatever. That's not thievery.
Zelda is also like the prototypical example I see of like games that, specifically Link's Awakening, of games that make you feel that but punish you for stealing.
Yes,
because
in Link's Awakening, if you steal from the shopkeeper in, is it Mabe Village?
I don't know. You're the one who's played Link's Awakening.
I don't think they talk in Link's Awakening. I'm pretty sure it's not voice.
Oh, in terms of pronouncing it, yeah, I don't know.
Like, how would I know? They don't say it. Anyway, if you steal from the shop, they will change your name to Thief. And
in all caps.
In all caps, Thief. And the shopkeeper eventually will murder you if you return.
Yes.
So
will instantly kill you with lightning magic,
which
of some sort
is as you would deserve.
Yes, that's very the prototypical example of like your actions have consequences in terms of stealing. Sort of an early example of the way that they attempt to punish you for it.
And little did they know they would ruin gamers forever with that.
Yeah.
The gamers would get that taste of, ooh, the game noticed me.
Yeah.
And now here we are, whatever, 20 years later, probably more than that, right? When did Link's Awakening come out? I don't know. Decades later. And people are writing like 3 different think pieces on theft and Avowed.
Yeah.
And that's all Link's fault. But yes, in preparing for this podcast, it became clear to me that people have very strong feelings, not just about being able to steal things in games, but about there needing to be punishment for that, which is a really interesting kind of like moral thing when you unpack it, right? People are upset if you can steal in games without punishment, which like probably says something about the society that we're in and how we actually feel about stealing.
I guess.
Like, people are like, there's no consequences to my theft? F this. I want to be thrown in jail.
I think it's an expectation for a specific genre of game that, like, stuff like Fallout and Skyrim have made, like, a key element of that.
Yeah.
Like, you're talking about this, like, oh, people really want consequences. That's really, like, a specific thing for, like, RPGs.
True.
Like CRPGs and like open world style RPGs.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, so let me talk about like more turn-based RPG stealing for a little bit, because I feel like so much of what we will want to talk about here is that more kind of like it's happening live in these like chance-based things. And stealing in turn-based stuff. Do you ever do this? I was thinking about this. Like, I haven't used... Obviously, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Remake is not turn-based, but I don't ever use the steal mechanic in that game.
I feel like I do sometimes. With Remake Rebirth, I do it more than I do in, like, true turn-based games, actually. Because, like, especially in Rebirth where you have Yuffie, like, she generates ATB so fast if you're using her right that, like, honestly, using one for a steal doesn't even feel like a sacrifice, really.
Yeah, but I don't need that many items.
Yeah, I mean, it depends also on what they're holding, which it does tell you when you analyze them, whether it's worth it to do or not. And I don't, like... If I'm changing my party around, I will move, like, analyze around if I need to, but I won't move steal around, right, in terms of, like, priority there. But, like, in a true turn-based game, it really does just feel like this is a waste.
Well, the only one I could think of, and it was only because I saw it somewhere else in somebody's thread, was, like, the old Fire Emblem games.
I mean, Fire Emblem is also a little different because I feel like this is different now. They're usually more like assassin characters, even at their like base level. But like you usually have like a thief.
Yeah.
Like that's a unit type. And so like that's what they're there for, right? And you have so many units on the field that using them to steal something also doesn't feel like you're wasting a turn.
Well, I did, though, in thinking about it, you know, and having read various threads and articles about people being like, well, when do you use this and when you don't? When does it feel worth it? I mean, I think Fire Emblem does some nice things in terms of balancing the utility of it, right? It feels silly to use steal in a lot of turn-based things because it's like, oh, I'm going to get a potion, and I would have gotten this potion when I killed it anyway, and, like... It's not even a rare item, and I maxed out at 99 potions anyway. Whereas in Fire Emblem, as I recall it in, like, the GBA ones, there would sometimes be items that, like, you wouldn't get them unless you stole them. Yeah. And items in those older games have actual durability that you can't save forever and can actually be rare, and, like, there's actually a limited number of the upgrade crests or whatever. And so being able to steal those from enemies actually gives you something that makes it worth taking that risk or spending that turn to do that. Whereas much of the time in other turn-based games, like the utility is just not there. Like not even just from like in an in-game perspective. Like I don't want to waste my literal physical time on a steal turn for something that's like, oh great, like I got a, clover leaf. Great.
Yeah, the turn-based style is very much like a balance of what's the value of what you're getting versus what's the effort that you're putting in. Because it is more of a trade-off.
Somewhere, which I thought was...
Design Doc did a video on how do games make stealing fun, and we sort of talked about, he broke it down into like vague sort of genre styles that would obviously have some exceptions, but like we already talked about like open world style, which is more sort of stealth based. There's not a lot of effort that goes into like an open world style stealing necessarily. It's just like waiting or making your window of opportunity, and then you click some stuff and like steal it, right?
Wasn't that interesting to you? Because it's something I hadn't really thought about. Can you think of any games where the actual stealing part of the stealing, like if I'm pickpocketing, right? I can't think of a single game where I actually play through the pickpocketing. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it's so fast, right? What would it be? Like a quick time event? That's essentially what you're doing anyway. I guess so. Games.
It was just interesting to me to think like, oh, like something that no one has really explored, and maybe they haven't explored it because it would just be bad. Like that's valid. But
I mean, most you could make something like a simulation type, like the like you eating ones, where you have to like move every part of like quap pickpocketing. But I feel like that would be the only
that would hit. People would
be the only way to go. And then
I'm not saying it has to be fully realistic. I'm just saying it's interesting to me that it feels like very few of these games even have a quick time event portion, which or any gameplay element beyond I've gotten to the right place, he hasn't spotted me, I click the button and I have a 75% chance to win.
Yeah. But the gotcha line that I wrote down from that was he was talking about FF9 as an example, which I think your main character in that one is like your thief character. And the way that one works is like every enemy has like an item table attached to it, and when you steal, there's like a chance percentage of getting a certain type of item, right? And the more basic ones are easier to get, and the rarer ones are harder to get. But you get something every time you steal, or most times you steal in FF9 versus the way it usually works where you either fail or succeed. But if you want to get the really, really good stuff, it's very unlikely. You're really going to have to be stealing. So the sacrifice cost there comes in a similar way. It's just like, well, at least you are getting stuff, right? Each time you steal, as opposed to fully just wasting the turn.
And there's probably not really a way to like save scum that in
other than
game,
like
right?
restarting the whole fight. Yeah.
Because I read this good thread that was sort of about, okay, like what are the different ways you can set up your mechanic, right? Like, first of all, how do you make sure players actually want to use it, right? There has to be good enough loot. It has to not be like so low a chance of success that you're never going to succeed, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, okay, like what's your percentage though? Like what are the different ways that you can play around with, like, do you succeed or not? And obviously like most of these things are in one way or another percentage based, whether or not that's amplified by items or skill checks or whatever. But, I certainly, when I was playing Skyrim, did plenty of like, oh crap, I failed. Good thing I saved right as I was crouched behind this guy's butt.
Right.
Let's just reload and try again until I get the item.
Yeah, when I was playing Baldur's Gate, which I should go back to at some point. When the heck will I have time for that? Never. But
someday.
Whatever. Generally the rule I made for myself is like, if I tried to steal something and I failed and then failed at talking my way out of it and the entire room then turned hostile against me, like, I reloaded and just left the item alone, right? Because it's like, do I want to ruin my whole experience because I just felt like having a stereo try to pickpocket someone? No, not really. Which is maybe a little
honest
unfair,
way to play it.
It's still unfair, right? If I was really playing honest, I would just accept my fate and die, I guess.
Sure, but it's an oddly honorable way to play it for being dishonorable.
Part of it is like save scumming and that like loading takes so long.
Sure.
So it didn't feel worth it to me to like try to reload and waste my physical time like that again. In a way, doing that is kind of like turning like an open world game or a CRPG game into a turn-based game.
That's true.
Right? You just the waiting time, the cost sacrifice is how many times you have to reload the game.
Emma's got a real like mod hack here, like Baldur's Gate turn-based.
It is. You can turn on turn-based mode in Baldur's Gate, but yeah, because battles are turn-based. I'm just thinking about the actual wandering around the world part. But in more turn-based style games or like party RPGs sort of games too. Anything where you have moves, I guess is sort of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You can be a little bit more creative with like what you're stealing. Usually in Skyrim and whatever, when you steal something, it's a physical object.
Yes, it's bread.
Yes, it's bread, it's someone's diary, it's some jewels, it's whatever. But when it's more of in like a combat scenario where your character has different moves that they can pull off, sometimes stealing is instead like, I'm stealing your health, I'm stealing your stats, I'm stealing your own abilities to use against you, right? Which is sort of an interesting twist on that. Of it's not like physical stealing, it's not a kind of stealing you could do like in reality, really, unless you're an energy vampire, perhaps. But it's still sort of the thing of like, I'm taking something from you and now it is mine.
100%. Stealing can be metaphorical too.
Exactly.
Although one thing I thought was like, okay, this is not what I'm talking about though, design doc, is like he was talking about like Mario Party. I was like, that's not.
That is stealing.
I know it's stealing, but I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about.
Sorry, I actually thought thinking about multiplayer stealing. We're really jumping around on this episode. That's okay. But like, there was a Kotaku article on why stealing things in video games is so damn fun, where they talked to both like a professor at the University of the West of Scotland and also a former thief who had gone to prison.
A robber.
Yeah, a real robber.
I loved that.
But I think I kind of disagreed with like the conclusions that were drawn from these. Like, Professor Graham Scott was talking about that like players might
Graham
not
Scott is way off here. Go on.
Particularly bothered by how the act of theft directly affects others, but that they're scared of the consequences in reality, and games present an outlet. And I feel like it's like being bothered by how the act of theft directly affects others is actually the fundamental difference between stealing in reality versus stealing in a game.
Yes.
Like, a lot of games do have consequences to theft. And yes, they're less severe consequences. They're not, like, my physical body is not on the line.
Yes.
There's certainly some crossover between, like, actions you take in person and actions you take online. And video games are closer to actions you take online, right? Mm-hmm. But also, in a single-player game, I'm, in fact, not directly affecting anyone with my theft. I'm directly affecting some lines of code.
Yeah.
And in fact, when you take out the moral aspect of stealing,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the conclusion is actually the opposite of what he draws a little bit.
Yeah, it is, obviously in the real world there's an impact on you and there's an impact on the other person or the thing that you're stealing from or whatever. And in the game there is only an impact on you.
Yes. And I guess there's a discussion to be had, and to be fair, when I searched like stealing in video games, one of the first results was Reddit "Our Christianity is stealing in video games a sin?"
Love that. What did they decide?
But they didn't really come to a conclusion. They didn't seem to be taking it very seriously. I felt very bad for the OP there.
Jesus would love Skyrim.
But I guess like there's some thoughts of like, well, is no stealing like an inherent moral for like living in a society, or is it a result of how our society is set up to have personal property in the first place, right? If things were communal, it's not really stealing anymore.
Yeah.
Right. But I did think thinking about it from a multiplayer angle was interesting, because in that case, like if you're playing Mario Party and you steal your friend's star, you are enacting harm on another person to a certain extent. But also, within the bounds of Mario Party, I feel like there is like a understanding of consent.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that stealing in by entering into a game of Mario Party, you have consented to a situation in which you may be stolen from.
Yeah.
In a way that like the NPCs in imagine like the NPCs in Skyrim have not consented to this.
Yes.
And like they are not people, they are lines of code, so it is not exactly a good one-to-one comparison. Yes. But theoretically, by engaging in Mario Party, you are acknowledging that you may be stolen from, and that like you are okay with that. That's part of the rules of the game. And
yes,
so it doesn't feel to
the
me
act of thievery and the act of the play acting of anger upon being stolen from is part of the play space essentially that you've entered into.
Yes,
which is I'm saying that when you play Mario Party, you should agree on a safe word, is I think what I'm saying. There are obviously multiplayer games, I feel like, where like the anonymity can maybe lead to like more harm.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're playing like on a server and there's some element of you can steal things from other people.
Well, and real money coming into play as well.
And real money coming into play. So, you can go past that, and I think there's multiplayer elements where maybe stealing in it is actually sort of enacting harm on another person in a way they didn't consent to. But I do think it's interesting to think about like the play space of I'm allowed to steal from you and you're allowed to sort of play act being upset about that.
Right. I mean, it's like I haven't actually embarked on a land war in Asia when I crush you at risk.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly. I hope. One can only hope. But people, why do people love stealing in games? Emma, I really liked the convicted robber in the Kotaku article. Like the Kotaku writer was like, I said to him that I hadn't stolen before because stealing in games doesn't count. And then the guy was like, you've stolen in games, you're a thief.
Yeah, I mean, it is just like, I don't know, the conclusion of like, yes, if you remove like human empathy and like our social convention from the act of thieving, then yes,
consequences.
It's different. Right? Yeah. Like I feel like those are the reasons you don't steal things, but also if you take those away, like are you like if the social convention is different and you're not stealing from a real human person, then is that really stealing anymore in the sense of like thieving? You know?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like the difference between escaping from prison and escaping from an escape room, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like, there's real consequences to the first one and real stakes. And the escape room takes that idea and is like, but what if it was fun and it was a challenge you could solve?
Sure.
Look, I imagine that planning an escape from prison, if you were to think about it sort of objectively, is probably a fun challenge.
Listen, I didn't watch the TV show, but I remember seeing lots of ads for it.
Prison Break.
Yeah, Prison Break.
People watched that show. In the same way, I imagine thinking about how you might pickpocket someone is probably a fun challenge. And were I able to develop that skill, not that, like, Americans aren't allowed to be pickpockets.
Yeah.
Not just legally, but culturally.
Yeah.
I think about this all the time, I successfully moved past the Barcelona era without getting pickpocketed.
Yeah.
Perhaps by walking on La Rambla, you have also entered a play space in which you consent
being pickpocketed.
to being pickpocketed. Like, you should be aware. But, like, man, in New York, I'm just like, oh, whatever. Like, my purse is unzipped. I've got my phone in my back pocket, and I have not a care in the world. And now that I've said that, I will get pickpocketed in the next week.
Yeah, you should be more careful because your phone is not, like, attached to tubes attached to you anymore. So
yeah, well, if anyone had tried to pickpocket the old phone, they would have been like, they would have done the Skyrim thing of, like, how do I put this back?
Yeah.
Like, this is useless. It's adding to my weight. Like, I don't want this. So you're right. I do need to be thinking more carefully about it now. But to circle back to what I was actually saying, if I had the opportunity to be like, ooh, I'm going to try to pickpocket someone with no consequences, like, this is just a fun thing that I get to try to do, that sounds fun. Absolutely. It's a challenge, like any other, like, silly little challenge. And, like, that's probably why it's fun. That's why we like doing it in games. It's a fun little challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's especially fun, apparently, mostly, when the game world notices us doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So no surprise, people like doing things in games that they don't like doing in the real world, but they really like stealing things.
Yeah. Very true. I do love, like, you know, the design doc video talked a lot about, like, the open world one, which is often reliant on, like, line of sight. Like, if someone sees you do it, right, then they will get mad at you. And so that part of the video is just full of clips of him trying to, like, put a pot on top of, like, the shopkeeper's head. So that he can steal because they've got a pot on their head, so they in fact can't see what he's doing, you know? Yeah. But that's what usually is the system is like, well, if someone saw you do it, then you're in trouble, right? And that's sort of the case with stealth games in general. There's a lot of crossover between, like, thievery systems and stealth systems.
Yeah. I did think so let me talk about Avowed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because wow, PC Gamer really went all freaking in on thinking about a thievery and Avowed, and to a lesser extent, what's the other game that just came out? Hang on, I'm trying to find it.
Kingdom Deliverance.
Yeah,
whatever.
Kingdom Come Deliverance, right?
Yeah.
2. Anyway, so Avowed, it's Obsidian, right?
Yes, it's Obsidian.
Recently came out, like, a action adventure role-playing situation, but, like, more limited, right? No romance, says Emma. And
yes, this was a big point of contention. Obsidian usually doesn't put romance in their games.
They don't believe in love.
For what it's worth. They don't. They do not believe in love in video games.
They also don't believe in cops. They believe in shared property. So in Avowed, you can take things, right? Sort of in the style of the old Zelda games.
Yeah.
Right? But there's no consequence to it. You can just walk in and take things, and nobody notices, and nobody cares. And understandably, I think, for people, that's a little disconcerting in a genre world now where we have started to establish the precedent of, if I steal things and somebody sees me, I have to be careful in that town.
Yeah.
And so people are like, oh, it's immersion breaking. Wah, 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 boo hoo hoo.
I have not played Avowed personally yet. Eventually, I will do my month of Game Pass for the year, and maybe I will try it.
Best deal in gaming.
Best deal, a steal, you might say.
I can't believe you said that. That's something I should say. Okay, go on. I hate myself.
But,
go ahead.
It's my understanding that Avowed is much more sort of straightforward and kind of linear than like a Skyrim or a Baldur's Gate, right? Like, it's a role-playing game in that you make decisions and you make a character, right? But in terms of like side things you can do, like, for example, stealing in a town and then getting in trouble and then having to avoid that town for a while, it's not focused on those systems on purpose, right? Because it's just a much more streamlined experience than some of these, which is either, like, that's not like a good or bad measure. It's just like that's clearly their design goal with Avowed. And like, I feel like we've had so many games now that are just so big and expansive and responsive, right? That it comes as a little bit of a surprise when a game like does not respond to your every move, I guess.
Yeah.
Which, understandable.
Of course.
People, this isn't a episode on power or control or whatever, but people like it when they're the center of the world, whether that's in positive manners or in the police have put out a bounty on me manner.
Yeah. People really want the police to put a bounty on them, though.
Exactly. Yeah.
I do have to read this quote. Well, I might have to read several quotes because I think there's just a bunch of like silly things here. I do have to read this quote from Joshua Wallens at PC Gamer, so Emma can make her funny quip about it. He goes, "A good." Sorry, I'm thinking about the joke that you will make. I think it's really funny. A good game is where you can steal back all the money you just spent at a shop. A bad game is when you can't.
Yeah, I read this and the structure of it really was like, this is like a made up thing that people would put on that photo of Miyamoto in the rushed game quote that's always shared around. Yeah. It's just like the structure is so similar. The rhythm is right, you know?
Would you please make that for the blog?
Okay, sure.
Consider
I'll see what I can do.
But like that to me is also interesting, right? This whole article, again, PC Gamer wrote about this from every perspective, which was like, I don't care if people like think that I can steal. If I can't steal in this way, it's bad. And also, like, I don't really care. It's like too easy to steal in this particular game. Like 3 different perspectives. And a lot of the discussion around like being noticed, right? Or like consequence systems like seem to ultimately have to do with like, but I want to outwit the consequence. Like, it's both a desire to exist in an immersive way, right? And also a desire to be too smart for that immersive system to impact you, which I think is a really interesting tension, right? We want there to be consequences, but in the real world, well, look, whatever. Let's not give cops too much credit. Right? But in the real world, the idea would be, well, if I steal from CVS, they will put everything in glass boxes and I will have to buzz to buy my deodorant now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like I read something that's like sales on these items have gone down. It's like, well, yeah.
No doubt. Recently, I accidentally bought what I thought was, I was like, I'm stocking up on shampoo and conditioner. This is not at all a relevant story, but I don't care. And I bought 3 things of shampoo and 3 things of hair product that was in another bottle that was slightly different colored, but looked like it matched the shampoo. Lo and behold, I run out of conditioner. I'm like, oh, it's so good that I bought 3 bottles of this. Let me pull it out of my little drawer. What I bought was 3 bottles of one type of shampoo and 3 bottles of another type of shampoo. So I have a lot of shampoo. My hair is really staticky.
Good.
And tangled.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I saying? Right. players really want there to be consequences, but they also really want to be able to spend the same 200 gold over and over and over and like totally outwit those systems. They want there to be complex systems, and they want to be able to break them, which I get it, but it's like really interesting.
I did think like I think the general like the good game whatever, the bad game whatever, I respect the opinion, right? But one of the other quotes from that same one that you shared was like, it suggests a dev team that's more concerned with constructing a space that feels real and malleable, even if it might be to the detriment of game balance. And it's like, I feel like we're just saying words there.
Yeah.
Like, okay, a game where I can reach over the cash register and take my money back is more real and malleable than one that doesn't let me do that.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like in both cases, we're kind of stretching the like, yeah, I could do that, but like, is it more real and malleable to do that? You know?
Yeah.
It's just, it's an interesting sort of. I don't know. I read that. I was like, I feel like we're stretching the point here a little bit.
Look, there's just something at the heart of gaming, and maybe this is why we like thievery in general, but we like to feel like we're cheating.
Sure.
In games. And like stealing in general already sort of feels like we're cheating, right? We're not supposed to be able to take that bow from the shop in Link's Awakening, and we did, and that's going to make the game easier for us because we have more money and we have a bow. And like gamers like that. Gamers like to feel like they are smarter than the game, but not too much smarter than the game. It's really hard.
Yeah.
We do. One thing gamers do love, though, is an angry shopkeeper.
Yeah, you gotta have the angry shopkeeper, I guess.
Have you seen Zelda? I'm sure Dad has sent this to us at some point because I kind of remembered it, but I watched it again. There's like a fun little skit on YouTube. I can't remember the channel. I'm sorry. I'll track this down. But like, it's a guy. He goes into a shop. He like has a pleasant interaction with the shopkeeper, and when he leaves, he accidentally like misclicks, and instead of grabbing the door, he picks up a scroll. Mm-hmm. And the shopkeeper is like, thief! Like, he's like, wait, I'm sorry, I just meant to leave. Like, and then she shoots him with a crossbow. But we like when shopkeepers want to fight us. We like in Spelunky when they're putting up wanted posters. We like when Charon is like, you stole from me. Here's a really hard boss fight.
Yeah, I never did that.
It doesn't feel worth it.
I mean, I guess it's just worth it for like the spectacle or novelty of it happening to you, right?
No, it's funny for sure. Yeah, but the thing is, the situation in which I would steal from Charon in Hades is when things are going really badly. And that's not a situation wherein I'm going to win a fight with him. You know what I mean? I'm stealing because I'm out of money, I'm out of health, and things are looking bad. And that's a situation where I will just die. Once you know
it's coming, it's like feels like something more that you like plan for, right? Like the first time might be a surprise, right? And then you're like, well, I shouldn't have done that. But then you might get later in the structure and be like, okay, I'm gonna fight. I know this will happen now, so I'm gonna fight him this time. But I just couldn't. Morally, I didn't want to hurt Charon. Yeah, the lines of code.
He's just a businessman.
Didn't want to inflict harm upon him.
I do also have to quote from a Games Radar interview with Derek Yu, the creator of Spelunky, this quote that I feel like is at the heart of gaming. Stealing came about naturally once I decided that Spelunky should have shops.
Yeah.
Truer words never spoken.
So true. I do feel like, Spelunky and Hades are both roguelikes of different sorts.
Of different appeal to me personally, let me tell you.
But they're both very centered around, like, well, you're going to die a lot. Right? And that does sort of encourage, like, an element of risk-taking that you might not have in another game.
Yeah.
Right?
And the consequences are not so permanent. You might mess up a good run. That's about the worst of it.
Yeah, so I just feel like you might be more willing to, like, try stealing, right, in those games.
Emma, where are the heist games?
Well, I think the last category of the design doc laid out. Well, one, he talks about like CRPG style is kind of like when you steal, you might be doing it like sort of like a single player heist, right? Where different party members will cast different things on other party members and you sort of collaborate to make the stealing effort go through.
Yes.
So there's that. There's some element there. And in that same way, I bet there are a lot of TRPGs out there. Or TTRPGs, I guess is the official term. Whatever.
That's right.
Tabletop ones that are about like planning and carrying out heists. But other than that, I feel like the last category of like action game stealing category, is very much like none of these really have like actual like heist planning, but they are sort of about like the spectacle of going through a heist. So like the Sly Cooper games, for example, right? You have these different characters. They have different roles in sort of the heisting stuff. You play different levels. And very leaning into like the aesthetics of thievery in sort of like the Robin Hood-y type of way. I don't know if Sly Cooper is really a Robin Hood, but he sort of looks like the... Was the Robin Hood movie Disney, or was it...
Yes, where he was a fox.
Yes, where he was a fox. It sort of evokes that sort of vibe.
It's true, but it was interesting to me in watching that part of the video and just preparing for this episode in general, how few games about being a thief actually involve very much thievery mechanic.
Yeah.
Like Sly Cooper is a platformer.
Right.
And like they were like, Grand Theft Auto has heists, or Grand Theft Auto is a heist game. I was like, no, it's not.
Well, I mean, I think all of these are like, again, about like the feeling of doing it, right? So there's a lot of thoughts on like aesthetic and spectacle and cutscenes, right? There aren't a lot of games that are like about like planning a heist.
I just want a game that pays off with the, and here's how it's all gonna go down. Like, and I recognize, and I was thinking about this in the lead up to this episode, that in many ways that incredible part of any heist movie where we get the like beautiful, it's laid out and like the things happen and some unexpected stuff happens and we roll with it, is something that is very hard to translate into a video game situation, because so much of the joy of it is that you, the audience member, don't know what's going to happen, and the characters in the movie theoretically are smarter than you are.
Yeah.
And like that feels very... It was interesting to think about how that feels hard to translate into a game form where you are in control. It's a storytelling thing that I really like, and it makes me sad, but like, I wish. I
don't remember where I picked this up, but I felt like I watched some video or something on like heist movies, and they were talking about like the trope is like if you're told the plan ahead of time, like something's gonna go wrong. Versus, like, if you're told the plan as it's happening, it's going off without a hitch.
Interesting, right? Yes.
Which is sort of interesting to apply to video games, right? Because it's not exciting if you know the plan ahead of time and then you watch it sort of play out perfectly, right? You want some element of surprise or improvisation in there.
I feel like you could do some kind of like roguelike heist planning thing. I feel like it's there. I feel like you could do it. You see what's taking shape here a little?
Yeah, there's this so one of the example design doc talked about last, which isn't quite like a thief game, it's more of an assassin game, but similar concepts, was like the Hitman games, which I do feel like is probably the closest that games get to like heist planning and right. Like plan carrying outing, you know, of like doing a crime, I guess. True. There's also this puzzle game called the Sexy Brutale, which is like you have to sort of move around the back rooms of this hotel and prevent murders from happening. Which I feel like you could take some of the mechanics of that, like the trial and error of like there's this plot going on and you're sabotaging it to like trying like different things, like heist things as well, you know? So I feel like there's potential for like games that have a structure that could work for like heists, but we just haven't like applied it to that. Yeah.
I just want one that Hitman really feels like it should appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe I'm just not good enough at it, or it doesn't, or I'm too inclined toward chaos to execute it. What I want is something that feels like a heist, like deck builder or something.
Yeah.
I realize that that's like a very Talk This Mashup thing to like throw out there.
I feel like it's very on brand for the indie scene right now. Maybe it'll come. You know?
Heist deck builder. The monkey's paw curls. I got my Katamari.
At what cost?
At what cost? Emma, do you like stealing in games?
I mean, I don't really like it in like turn-based games. I feel like I like thieving that isn't like item-based in those, right? I like like health steal and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just played Tales of Symphonia last year, and there is a part where like you have to get a few of a same type of item, and to do it faster, you really want to just be spamming Colette's steal skill, and it is very amusing that when she fails, she does just trip and fall on her face.
Whoops.
Which is great. I like that it doesn't just fail, she just like wipes out. It's good. And she broke her nose several times while we were trying to get that item. And you know, I don't really play a lot of like Skyrims or Fallouts or those types of games to begin with. And I found in Baldur's Gate 3, I kind of just did it to do it. More than like thinking it through or anything. I was like, I'm just gonna switch to the Astarion here real fast and like just see, you know? Like it never really had a lot of thought behind it when I did it, and I was always carrying so much useless stuff in that game, because they had not like put in any like good console inventory management systems yet. Because I just sort of like took stuff. I feel like some of it is also like there was that other PC gamer on Avowed that was like, I can just walk into someone's house and like pick stuff up, that I feel like is both like a complaint on like stealing, but also just a complaint on like games giving you like little things to pick up everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, like the sort of gathering element, gathering and crafting that games like these days.
Yeah.
Or these days, since always, really. But yeah, a Baldur's Gate was a lot of like just sort of compulsively picking up and stealing items without really having much fun about it, right? It was just like I got something.
Wow,
Nice.
let's hope Emma doesn't become a thief in real life. That seems like that seems bad.
I think I was remembering when I was a wee child, and the toy store that we went to in the shopping center that no longer has any shops in it, really. I did once pick up a little deer figurine, and I meant to put it on the counter when we were buying things, but I forgot. And I did walk out with it.
Thief! Now everywhere Emma goes, people refer to her in all caps as thief, and she doesn't know why.
Yeah. I was reminded of this because there was like an IGN interview in 2014 with the people who were making the Thief reboot, which I'm pretty sure was not very well received, if I remember correctly.
Shh, don't worry about it.
But Nicholas Cantine was saying, like, we all know the feeling of when you were a kid stealing some chewing gum. It was interesting talking about those feelings. We tried to reproduce that feeling of anticipation, the stress of stealing something, and when you get it, you want to escape. And I'm just wondering how many... they're like French or whatever, so I don't know. Maybe they steal more chewing gum in France, but
Or maybe everyone's
that's a universal,
doing that. Just
universal experience. But my childhood thieving experience was like, oops. I didn't really have a sense of anticipation or danger or anything. It was just like I got in the car and I was like, oh, oops. I'm still holding this. I guess it's mine now.
Well, listeners, on that wholesome note, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Do you, listeners, like me, yearn for a heist deck builder? I feel like there's something there. Do you enjoy the feeling of using the same 5 gold at every shop in town? Do you feel like you miss the days where we could just go in and break pots and there were no consequences? Do you yearn for morality where you will be punished for your actions? Do you think that a good game is a game that's rushed? Wait, no, that's not it. Anyway, listeners, if you have thoughts about this or anything else we talked about this week, hit us up on our website. Well, actually, first on social media. Oh, I'm stealing from later in my outro. Hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog featuring long-running series, Click It Boyfriend, Split Screen, and lots of other Emma-based blog content. But most importantly, if you enjoy the show, you ought to subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts. Subscribe to Talk This so you never miss an episode on Sundays.
Yeah, I should have a blog. It's the end of a school quarter, so I'm not making any promises, but I should have a blog coming soon on replaying Transistor, because I wanted to do that on things I was re-experiencing this year. So you can look forward to that. 2 weeks from now, we're talking about... next week. 1 week from now. I'm stealing time from myself. I did have time stolen from me last week.
As did we all. That would have been a good reason for me to say, oh, that's why, but that wasn't the inspiration.
You're right. You should have remembered that. Anyway, next week we're talking about Famicom Detective Club, I'm pretty sure, and Anton Blast for definitely.
And then it's Emma's side quest.
And we'll be talking about something.
We sure will.
I'll be in Richmond.
We'll be talking about games set in Richmond.
I don't know if I wonder if there are any. You know?
Category. Video games set in Virginia.
Virginia, sure. But what about Richmond specifically, I wonder?
Wow, it's just all games that have something that takes place at the Pentagon. Assassin's Creed 3 is set in Virginia.
Is that like colonial times or something?
I don't know. It is set in colonial America. So maybe. Yeah. Anyway, listeners, that's this week's show. Thanks for listening. Emma, steal a little more time with a sign-off.
This week, I hope you keep all your possessions close at hand.